So let's look at the next version of the game. We've got a form, we've got a response page, and we've got the game logic buried into the response page. And if you try the version out that we've got so far, it basically enables you to enter a thrust and click OK, and then the values are changed. Then you enter a thrust and you click OK and the values are changed. And just clicking OK over and over again, and it reloads the form over and over again, and it passes the values nicely through to the next form. But we don't actually have any way for the game to actually finish. So what we need to do now is add some logic, some flow into the response page to capture those end conditions. Now the way that this is going to work is we'll end the game when the height is less than or equal to 0, because at that point you've basically landed or crashed into the ground. So using a kind of box and arrow notation, you can see what actually happens here is we sort of go round the loop, and while the height is greater than 0, we go round and round and round, taking values from the user, altering the values inside the game, until there comes a point where the height is less than or equal to 0, and that's when we stop the game. Now, this is a little bit more complicated than it initially seemed, because what we'll have to do is we'll have to wrap up lots of the existing code, which is HTML code, into an if statement. Now, there are going to be two possible outcomes. Either we're going to carry on playing the game, and we carry on playing the game if the height is greater than 0, or we're going to finish the game. So it's going to look something like this. So here's some very standard PHP code that's in an if statement. If the height is greater than 0, basically we print the form. That's what we do in that first brace. Otherwise, we finish the game. Something like that. Now, the problem, of course, is that first bit where it says code to generate the next loop iteration. That's our HTML form. And of course, we need that to actually be PHP, because what we're actually going to do is we're going to embed that inside that original if statement. So we will use a whole bunch of print statements to actually print the HTML at that point. Now, the key here is to note the flexibility that comes in PHP, because we can use double quotes and we can use single quotes. So if it's the simple line where we're using simple HTML, so have a look at that first line. You can see we've got a string, and that string's got some HTML inside it. It's got an H1 element, an opening tag and a closing tag, and that's absolutely fine. No problems there. I can use double quotes to wrap that string up. But look at the third line. If you look at the third line, and this is the first line of the form, inside our form we have to use double quotes. Look at the bit with the attribute where it says name equals my form and action equals process for game.php. In HTML, those attributes need double quotes to work. So we can't place double quotes on the outside. Of course, this is where PHP is quite flexible, because it allows us to use single quotes. So simply, if there's an attribute which is going to require me to use double quotes inside the string, I'll use single quotes on the outside. So those are the first three lines of the form, and here's the rest. And what I've done is I've basically gone through, and all of this, nearly all of this, is single quotes on the outside. There is one other thing that's going on in here. If you remember, what we have to do is we actually have to print the value of the height into the form element. And I've changed the code here a little bit. You can see it now. It just prints that in, and I'm using string concatenation. So the bit where it says, if you look along the second line, read only equals read only. So we know this is going to be a read only form element. And it's the next bit which is important, where we go value equals height. So I'm going to actually print the height into that space. So it's a string, height is going to be inserted at that point, and then I've got a string at the end which is closing the paragraph off. You can see that in all of those lines for height, speed, and fuel and thrust. Thrust is the only one which isn't read-only, because that's the one where the user can actually type a value into the field.